This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode number 33. We are joined today with Tyler McGinnis, and he's coming to us from, what is it? It's a conference, right? JavaScript conference?
Yep, Mountain West JS.
Mountain West JS. A lot of good speakers over there from what you've shown me. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk today about React Week and some of the stuff that you guys are doing, a little bit of ngconf, and anything else you want to throw in. You're doing a lot of really interesting things with your job and outside of that with teaching. And could you kind of tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So what I do, I guess, for a living is I essentially just teach JavaScript and Angular and everything that goes with that. So I am a lead instructor at a Learn to Code school here in Provo, Utah. It's called Dev Mountain. And essentially what we do is, we get students who are really excited about learning and about learning to code, and we teach them basically full-stack JavaScript stuff. So on top of that, I also am a Firebase expert, so I really like Firebase, do a lot of stuff with them. And then on top of that, I'm also organizing React Week, which is essentially just a workshop for learning React and everything that goes along with React.js.
So on our panel today, we have Danny Blue from Deloitte Digital, and Nick Niemeyer. He's a JavaScript agent over at New Relic. So we know who everybody is. Danny, you there? Okay. Well, if Danny gets his voice back, he can chime in. So you said you're a Firebase expert, and I noticed that React Week, which is a full week from what I can see of training in React, and not just the framework, but dealing with the entire building an application. So similar to like if you learn something like Swift and then you'd have to learn iOS, like the whole thing. So it's interesting to me because you're doing Flux, and you've chosen Webpack, and well, maybe you haven't, but your group has chosen Webpack and Firebase. Is there reasons why these technologies really go well together?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, interesting enough, I chose Gulp and Browserify initially, but Ryan Florence kind of vetoed me and went with Webpack, and for good reason. So the reason we chose these is, one, I mean, React is obvious. That's the whole point of the week. Flux is a really nice way to kind of architect your React app, and I don't know if there's a better way as of right now. I know in the future there's Facebook has some other things they're working on. I think it'll kind of overtake Flux, and that's kind of the goal. But we went with Flux, and we try to stay away from like Reflux or like Tuxedo.js or all those other kind of layers on top of Flux, just because this is a workshop, so we didn't want to get too deep into abstractions. And Firebase works really, really well, and it actually works really well with React. And what we didn't want to have to do is have to teach some like data store language or anything like that. We wanted to just focus entirely on React and Flux and React Router, and so Firebase allowed us to do that very nicely, I guess.
So just a simpler backend for front-end developers, so that they don't have to worry about learning the back-end piece of it.
Exactly, yeah. And what's nice with Firebase too is you get that real-time binding, and authentication is really nice with Firebase. A lot of things, they abstracted a lot of things that makes something like React Week possible, where we don't have to worry about that second whole half of web development, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think the third or fourth episode of this podcast we had Osama Alami on.
Oh, nice.
Firebase.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. And he talked a lot about why Firebase is such a great tool for developers. And it is. They're doing really good things with hosting and the real-time applications with Angular that I've seen, and now I'm starting to see more with React. It's really interesting.
Definitely.
So tell me, how did Ryan Florence, developer in Utah as well, he started this React Week, but how did all of this come about? Like, were you involved in this? As far as like creating it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hold on. I'm getting a lot of feedback from what we talked about earlier. Let me, so I'm trying to pay attention to you, but I have all these things going on in my head. So one sec, let me try to figure out what's going on.
They're not just voices in your head, they're real people. That's good.
Hey, I'm going to leave the call real quick and jump back on. Is that okay?
Sure, sure.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Cindy, you've done a lot of React work. What other integrations have you used? What other technologies? Because they have the router, they're using Webpack, the React Week. What have you done?
Oh man, so I always build it with Browserify, usually using Gulp. Um, I haven't tried Webpack yet. A lot of people seem to like it, but the stuff I've done historically is really kind of like pushed the edges of the build system. And Browserify, I can like go in and read the code and figure out what's happening. And Webpack is really powerful, and it builds smaller bundles than Browserify does. Uh, but it was big in a way that I couldn't understand directly, which is my main turnoff there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it, but I don't know what the big differences are. I know Danny's been working with this too. I kind of wish he'd be able to jump on soon.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys.
Welcome back.
Awesome. We were
What
just talking
happened?
about Browserify and the difference between
Well,
Webpack.
yes, I had another window open, so I was hearing our earlier conversation as you were talking, and it was like way weird. But we figured it out. So the question was essentially like the history of React Week, how it got started. Was that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So basically, when I first got into React about 8 or 9 months ago, one of the very first things I did was kind of research the best way to approach learning React, because I think whenever you're new to something, you kind of want to find the best way to learn it, and then just do that and not have to worry about all this other fluff that comes along with learning. So I Googled and I tried to find if there was any React workshops, but there weren't, just because React was so new at the time. So that was, I guess, planted a seed in my head. Then I kept learning React, and I started the React.js Utah meetup group. And so React in Utah specifically got really big fairly quickly. A lot of the really big name Angular developers were kind of jumping to React and really liking it, and then obviously Ryan came over from Ember. So Ryan came and spoke at the React.js Utah meetup group, and then, so for my job, I kind of mentioned this earlier, is I mostly just teach people. So I kind of always have that learning and teaching background, and that thing in my head that's always thinking about teaching and learning and the most effective way to teach people. And I came up with this idea, and essentially just a React workshop. And I don't know if there are many, at least I haven't seen many other week-long workshops. So we debated for a long time whether we wanted this to be like a 2-day thing, or if we wanted it to be a week-long thing. I think with a 2-day thing, you can get a lot more people there, but it's really hard to teach people everything they need to know in 2 days. So we went with a week, kind of took a risk and hope that people would come, and hope that they'd be able to take a week off of work. If we can kind of position ourselves to say, if you come to this thing, you'll actually dive really deep into React and learn router and Flux and all these different things. So I contacted Ryan and said, hey, this is my idea. I think this would be great. There's nothing like this right now. There's even like very few good online tutorials for learning React, which is rare because Angular has like so many things to learn. So Ryan said it's a great idea, and went along with it. And since then, which was I think like mid-November, we've just been writing curriculum and getting everything ready, and now the time's come. So it starts next week. We're really excited for it.
That's pretty awesome. You're doing curriculum, you said. Do you have like, do the other teachers contribute to building this curriculum, or is it
Yes.
just you and Ryan?
So what essentially happened was I created version 1.0 of the curriculum. I went through, and every day, so it's broken up into, there's mini projects, which is essentially the whole class, all the attendees will get together and we'll walk through a project. So what we found, what I found at Dev Mountain, which is just my day-to-day job, is that there's a pretty big gap between going from lectures to like a real intense project, and a lot of students get lost during that gap. So what we do is this little project where we'll give the attendees a few things to do, then they do it, and then we'll walk through it as a class, and then we'll just do that for about an hour, and then we'll jump to the main project. So the way it's scheduled is we have that mini project, or we have lecture in the mini project, and then we go to lunch, and then the rest of the day is spent on just like an actual project, which is really fun.
Yeah, I used to teach full-time a lot of JavaScript and Photoshop and a lot of the Adobe products.
Mhm.
And I found that a lot of the curriculum out there that's sort of produced for these tech companies is very much get them in, get them out. You know, a one day,
Exactly.
you know, file open, go to this, do this. It's like spoon fed, and then you don't really learn anything.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
there's so many things online now, like egghead.io. I know you had John Lundquist
Yeah, he's
on
great.
at the Utah React. But yeah, I mean stuff like that. It's just bite-sized information that's easy to consume, and then
Mhm.
you actually do something with it.
Yep.
So I think that's great what you're doing. Um, have you encountered any feedback from people that you guys have shown this to?
Yeah, so far, really good feedback. So I showed it to specifically Matt Zabriskie. I don't know if you know him. He works with Ryan at Instructure, does a lot of Angular stuff, and now he's doing a lot of React stuff. So he's one of the full-time mentors. I showed him the curriculum about a week ago, and he was really impressed. It's been nice because in my world, with kind of everyone that works with me, building curriculum and these mini projects and thinking about how students think and the best way to approach learning is all kind of just common knowledge for us, and we just do it every day. And I think we take for granted how the rest of the industry doesn't really do that because they're worried about making money and building software and all these things. So when I showed it to Matt, he was really impressed just because it's really in depth. Essentially, we've taken all the lessons we've learned from teaching beginners, and we're able to apply those things to teaching more intermediate to advanced students with React. So far, good feedback. I think all of our attendees will really like what we have going. So
So you've done a lot in the Angular community as well. Have you shown this to somebody who doesn't know React, who is like maybe even like because I've had this Danny and I actually we did a one of those it's academics for Polymer, and
cool.
we found that there was a lot of people who were there who they weren't experts per se. They were new. They were very curious and they were very positive and they wanted to learn, but they required know how to use Bower or
Yeah, exactly.
things that like you sort of say, well, people know this already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've tried to make no assumptions about prior knowledge. I think that's a mistake that a lot of teachers, especially developers, when they
Mhm.
get into a teaching role, make. Is I mean, you can be talking about something as simple as like mapping over an array in JavaScript, but if they don't know what a for loop is, it's going to be really weird. So especially with the React Week curriculum, I've tried to make no assumption, and the assumptions I have made have been very clear. And for those who kind of don't meet that bar, I've sent out a prerequisites email that's essentially like, hey, you should understand a little bit about how like common JS syntax works and how to require something. You should be fairly familiar with JavaScript, and ideally have some experience with like Angular, Ember, or Backbone, or some other front-end framework. So yeah, I've really tried to not make assumptions about what people know, because then all of a sudden day one, half the class is lost, and the rest of the week is terrible because everyone's trying to catch up and it's a bad experience. So I've definitely learned from my mistakes there. So I don't think we'll have that issue with React Week.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had it one time where I was teaching office classes, and I had somebody come into the school, and they didn't even know computers.
Mm-hmm.
Their job just told them they needed to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
That was probably one of the most difficult teaching roles that I've had.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult because you get this person who's really excited and they want to learn, but they're not where they need to be.
Yeah.
So at least from all the applicants or all the people, all the attendees that have signed up so far, most of them are mid to senior level. If they are more junior, then we usually give them prerequisite stuff to go over before.
So are any of these events, is there going to be any videos or things that are released with some, maybe even the curriculum, some of it, to open source or anything like that?
We're still deciding what we're going to do there. So there's 2 tickets for React Week. There's the online ticket, and then there's the in-person ticket. The online ticket essentially gets live streamed lectures, and then they get a downloaded version later on, and they also get access to curriculum. And then in-person obviously gets curriculum and prizes and all those things. So we're debating kind of what we want to do after the workshop as far as like open sourcing and any of that. We're not opposed to it, but we're not entirely going that route yet, just because we do have paying customers who are essentially paying for curriculum and the lecture. So if we open up to everyone, then it kind of devalues the online class. So we're not really sure there.
It's tricky.
But It is tricky. Yeah, it's definitely tricky because I mean, I'm obviously very open sourcey, and I like going that way. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, maybe the route that John Lundquist has taken, where there's some that are free and some
Exactly.
that they're
Yep.
not,
And
might be
maybe
a nice middle ground.
yeah, exactly. And that's definitely a possibility where we open up maybe the first day's curriculum and lecture where it's just like intro to React, where you're talking about state and props and all those things. So that's actually very likely.
And as far as like the tools and practices that you utilize in teaching, how is it different teaching something like Angular, which is very much about the DOM, and I guess not about the DOM, but more DOM focused,
Yeah,
with
definitely.
directives and things like that, and React? Like, how do you approach teaching either one of those?
It's going to be tricky because React is an entirely different paradigm. So the pros and cons that I've seen of both is with React. So at Dev Mountain, where I work, we do very heavy, just vanilla JavaScript stuff for about 2 weeks, where we go through functions and loops and arrays and objects and like this keyword and new and object.create and all these kind of more advanced JavaScript stuff. But then when we jump into Angular land, Angular kind of abstracts all of that stuff for you. So we don't really get to apply the fundamental JavaScript stuff that we do learn. But what's nice about React is it's a lot of just vanilla JavaScript. And Ryan Florence says this all the time, like the things people get caught up with learning React isn't really React itself, but more of like that they don't understand fundamental JavaScript principles. So that's what's great about React is that you're doing a lot of like stuff with like the this keyword, and you're using map, and you're doing all these vanilla JavaScript things. The con of that is if you don't have a solid understanding of fundamental JavaScript stuff, React can be a little weird at first because there's a lot of like reducing and filtering and those kind of things. With Angular, it's nice because you can do a lot of things very quickly, and beginners really like that. Whenever, like the very first time we ever like ng repeat through anything with Angular with beginners, their heads just explode because it's really nice. And then you throw like simple filtering on top of that, with which Angular comes essentially built in with. It's really, really nice, and they love it, and their eyes like light up, and this is like that moment where they can actually build real things, which is really fun for them. So it's pros and cons to both. It really just depends on how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah, I remember when I was first learning Angular several years back. I think it was 2010 or 11, whatever it was, like still very, very low numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It was I found that the transition for me from jQuery, something that's so like grab this element,
Mm-hmm.
add an event handler, do this, to dealing with scopes and dealing with directives and controllers, and I understood some of these concepts, but it wasn't entirely something that I was used to working with.
Yep.
And I kind of feel like that's kind of the transition from Angular to React, where now you have this virtual DOM, and now you have to deal with immutable data. There's also this architecture built on top of it that helps you to create a unidirectional flow. So there's a lot of concepts that if you're a back-end engineer, a lot of that is mixed into React, and some of it was put into Angular too. I felt
for sure.
It's sort of like a blending now, where everything is in the client.
Yeah, definitely. I think the way to go if you're starting out is to kind of just look at both of them, because you can pick up the fundamentals of Angular and React fairly quickly, and you can obviously go very deep into both of those. But I think understanding the pros and cons of both and kind of how they fit into the ecosystem is really beneficial, especially if you're starting out with web development.
Right. And I've seen people use them together even, which is a little shocking.
Yeah, actually, Dave Smith, who's a developer at a Utah developer, he's speaking at Conf about using React with Angular, so I'm really excited for that talk.
Very nice.
It's really interesting seeing someone who's so pragmatic about it. Generally, React versus Angular is a really polarizing argument in the community right now. I don't think it needs to be.
It definitely doesn't need to be, and I think it's just human nature to kind of take that approach. Like, hey, I'm a React developer, I'm an Angular developer. When actually the talk I'm giving today at Mount West.js is just how that's not healthy, and you're just a software engineer, and the tools that you have are just tools, right? They don't define you, and they don't make up who you are. So I feel like the more we can get away from stop talking like I'm an Angular developer, I'm a React developer, the better we're going to be as a community. I think that's what's more important, is pushing the web forward rather than like segregating ourselves inside of our own little world.
Definitely. So you're an experienced teacher in the tech community, which is great. I remember when I was teaching, there wasn't that many people who were very effective teachers and coders. You know, one or the other. How do you approach an event that's in a classroom versus, you know, this event, which is this giant, you know, conference? Not giant, but like very, like a week long almost. And then you have, you know, online also. Like, how do you approach these teaching strategies?
The common ground there has to be the curriculum. I've tried to design the curriculum in a way where if you didn't get the lectures, but you had some like intro to the topic, you would still be fine. And so that's always the goal, is like, hey, if teaching just doesn't work out, we're still going to be fine, because the curriculum starts off initially to be very hand-holdy, and it walks you through the steps, and then it gets more advanced. So I think that's the kind of the secret to being able to work with online or in person or wherever the ecosystem is just having really solid curriculum that works for junior developers all the way up to senior developers. And that's really tricky to do, but luckily we have pretty good experience writing curriculum like that. So I think we'll be good for Reactor.
Yeah, it seems like where you are, I think you're in Provo, Utah, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of great technology education places there.
For sure.
You have Pluralsight. You have your group.
Yeah, Egghead's out here too. There's some really. Utah's great for some reason. Utah loves JavaScript, so it works out.
Hey, we're not complaining. So you have mini lectures and regular lectures on this?
Yep.
So what's the difference between those?
So mini lectures are very, very hand-holdy. They're optional, and if the lecture went okay and you're feeling fairly confident, what we'll do is we'll walk through the mini project as a class. So I'll say, okay, for the first 15 minutes, do these 3 steps. Then they'll go and do those on their own, and then after that 15 minutes, I'll just walk through and show you kind of how to do those steps, and then we'll essentially do that until the project is over. So it's very hand-holdy. We go very slow, but it's a fantastic kind of middle ground between the lecture, which is not hands-on at all, and the actual project, which is very hands-on. It's kind of that middle ground, I would say.
And how much hands-on versus lecture do you usually have across the whole program?
Very heavy hands-on. So I think during lectures, people get this false sense of security that they're actually learning the thing. And it's dangerous, because what happens is you do a lecture, everyone's feeling really well and really good, and then they go to apply it, and it's really difficult making that transition. So I would say lecture to hands-on, probably 70-30, favoring hands-on practice.
That's great. And you're able to adapt in a classroom setting, like an in-person setting, to different people learning differently, where somebody can go over and help them? Or do you usually have like a couple of TAs or anyone? Yeah,
we're going to have probably like 10 mentors. And most of them have experience mentoring before, so they understand kind of how the student thinks and where they get stuck and things like that. So yeah, lots of mentors, lots of teachers there, lots of hands-on stuff. And the idea is that students struggle, but not to the point where they're not learning. There's kind of that ground between where you struggle a lot, and then it just starts to get frustrating, and you go downhill. We want to catch you right before you start going downhill and kind of give you a little boost, so you continue learning, and the entire week can be this really educational experience.
Yeah, if you don't struggle at all, you don't really get much out of it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's a great point. And are these projects team-based, individual-based? Are they set out in like a cookie-cutter fashion where you're building this part and then this part, or is it more open?
Nope, it's pretty cookie-cutter. That kind of has a negative connotation to it, but in this case I don't think it works, because...
is it templatized, I guess, is a better way to say.
Yeah, exactly. The way it is we'll say, hey, this is the project you're going to build. There'll be like a link to it and a live version of it. And then there'll be steps that essentially get you to the live version, to the full-blown version. So the first part will be like, okay, you need to create a file structure that looks somewhat similar to this. And you can vary from the actual curriculum. But if you're struggling and you need to stick kind of point by point, you can do that as well. So it's designed to be fairly flexible. But yeah, each day we'll be building different projects. So by the end of the week, you'll have roughly like eight projects you've built with React.
And do you do the projects team-based, or are they individual?
They're just individual.
Okay.
Individual. If attendees want to like pair program or whatever, that's definitely beneficial as well. So pretty flexible. But I imagine most people will just do it individual.
Yeah, it's really hard to institutionalize pairing for that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's really beneficial though if you do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely beneficial, but sometimes people really hate it, which is understandable. But yeah, it's tricky balancing like how much do you want to force a person to do something even though it'll benefit them, and not force them when it might not benefit them as much. So we're going with the approach of everyone can choose to be in teams if they want, but if you want to do it individual, that's fine too.
Yeah, I've done a lot of Node School events, helping mentor and stuff, and occasionally I try to like encourage people to pair, and usually unless they came in as friends, they're not willing to have that kind of vulnerability around a new person.
Exactly. Yeah, it's tricky, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I've seen that at meetups as well. It's it's definitely a problem because pair programming can, it does take a little more time. That might be an issue, but it does help a lot, I've found.
For sure.
Are you guys doing? I don't know what the whole story is, so maybe it's not a React thing, but I should know by now because we've had a lot of people talk about React on the show. But the testing story for React. So are you guys doing any unit testing or end-to-end testing?
We're not. And a lot of people I think will hate that for good reason. Testing is super fundamental. It's really important.
I think you'll have some who do and some who don't, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was one of those gray areas. Our goal with React Week is to get people to the point where they know React and Flux and all those and Router well enough that they could then jump into testing or jump into like server-side rendering or even native when it comes out and do those and learn those things fairly well. And so sadly testing kind of got pushed back, so we're not going to cover it. But ideally after React Week you should be able to go learn it fairly easily.
And are you guys doing server-side rendering too?
That's one of those things where I think so. The way it's going to work is Monday through Friday is like very set. There's set lectures with set topics. Or Monday through Thursday. Friday is I'm leaving open to Ryan to cover essentially anything that he wants or anything that the class wants. Some of the topics that might be covered, server-side rendering, like custom mode with JavaScript with React. Testing's another one. GraphQL and Relay, the things that Facebook just announced. Depending on where they're at, we might cover those. It doesn't look like they're going to be out yet, so we probably don't have much material there. Native's another one where if it's out, like Ryan will cover it, but I don't think it'll be out. So Friday's open to whatever the class wants or whatever Ryan wants, and I think it'll be very, very much that like isomorphic JavaScript testing, kind of all those not edge cases, but edge cases as far as like fundamental React stuff that we'll cover.
Very cool. And you have the React router you guys are teaching us all.
Yep.
So
that one was kind of an obvious choice because, I mean, if you want Ryan Florence to teach at your workshop, you teach React Router because, I mean, arguably, I think it is. In my like very biased, but I try to be non-biased. But in my very biased opinion, React Router is fantastic. I don't know, and I. At least for the next while, probably won't use another routing solution for React just because React Router solves all the needs that I have, I guess.
Well, it's kind of hard because like UI router for Angular, I think is awesome. It's a lot more complicated though to work with than the standard router in Angular. But then you have I wish Danny was here to talk about Ember. So Ember has these very, I guess, Railsy type of routes the way that it's set up. Which makes sense. And there's so many different solutions for a lot of the other frameworks, and I haven't seen too much that sort of challenged React Router. So I think it seems like it's. I mean, I don't know for sure. It seems like it's pretty solid, you know,
Yeah, definitely.
and people are going to kind of take it as a standard.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we've done, and I have no problem with that, just because it is really good, and Ryan and Michael are putting a lot of time into it, so no complaints there.
All right. And so for React Native and these other pieces that hopefully will come out soon, that is definitely depressing that they're not out yet.
No.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to checking out GraphQL and Relay.
Yeah, looks fantastic.
So what else about teaching do you love?
What's great about teaching is you get to like fundamentally impact someone's life. That's really, really rare. But with teaching, you get to do it all the time. And what's nice about teaching at like a learn to code school or even React, because the people that are there really want to be there because they're paying you lots of money to be there. So they're always really passionate and really excited about what you're talking about. And so yeah, it's just that being able to impact people on a very fundamental, very important level. That's fantastic.
And as far as like next steps, do you think React Week will turn into another event?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We've got a few requests to go to Europe, but I think everyone gets requests to go to Europe when you're doing some like tech conference thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just really focused on making this one as good and successful as I can. And then once it's over, we'll kind of talk about the future and whatnot. But yeah, for now, I'm just focused on getting through next week.
So how did you end up in the Firebase Experts program?
Great question. So I spent some time in San Francisco for a little bit, and then met Sarah and all the Firebase people. I kind of just stayed close with them, and then continued to build Firebase things at Dev Mountain, the place I teach. What we do is before we jump, so we do front end and then we do back end. But before we jump to back end, we do like a no server project, which really gets students experience building front end apps, but they don't have to worry about like building a server and all those things. And we use Firebase for that. So I just kept teaching Firebase and writing blog posts about it and kind of advocating it. And then I went and had lunch with their UX guys out probably 6 months ago, and they just invited me to it. So it's been great so far.
We're really lucky that way with the community. You know, if you reach out to people, they're 9 out of 10 times they're pretty cool about it and like, hey, yeah, come have some coffee with us, go out for a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Firebase does really well, like taking care of the people who use it and helping them kind of be successful. That's what I really like about it.
And now that it's rolled back into Google, do you think that things will change with how Firebase is used with our applications?
Yeah, I don't know. So we had like a Firebase experts meeting a few days ago, and one of my questions I had for them was essentially how's the culture changing and things like that. Like, should we expect any changes? And their answer was essentially like they are making more of an impact on the Google Cloud Platform's culture than Google Cloud Platform is making on them. So they seem really hopeful and really assuring that like, no, Firebase is moving forward. We're still working on it. And they've never given me a reason not to trust them. So I'm still trusting them. And I'm still kind of all for Firebase and the future of Firebase.
So are there other online training resources that you would recommend to people to learn React or more about Angular or JavaScript in general?
Yeah, so Egghead does a really good job. If you're a beginner, Egghead, like learning React, might not be the best thing for you because it's really quick. But the Egghead guys do a really good job. For Angular, I'm blanking right now. I know there's some really good resources for learning Angular. For JavaScript, there's a website. It's kind of weird, but it's called javascriptisSexy.com, I think. And he does a really, really good job of like explaining like intermediate to advanced JavaScript fundamentals that are really important. So if you're new to JavaScript but you kind of want to jump into this world of writing good JavaScript code, I would start there. For Angular, I really like Dan Wallin has a video like Angular in 60-ish minutes. It's kind of old because he wrote it a few years ago, but it does a really good job of giving you an overview of Angular. And then Pluralsight has some great courses. I know Joe Eames, he's one of our teachers at Dev Mountain, but he also has some Pluralsight courses that are really good. And I think there's actually even some React courses on Pluralsight too. So I would check out Egghead, Pluralsight. These are all Utah companies. I don't know if I'm just biased or what by recommending them.
Yeah, Joe actually had a really good one on ES6 on Pluralsight. Nice. And definitely check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, Pluralsight has some really good stuff.
So you were saying, I'm sorry, what else was there?
I would say Egghead.io, Pluralsight, and then JavaScript is sexy for just fundamental JavaScript stuff.
Very cool. And as far as like, I attended the JS Remote Conf, and I was sick, so I really wasn't able to like be in the meetings themselves, like online, so much. But I watched a lot of the videos afterwards, and it seems like a really interesting format. Have you guys considered doing something like that as a additional React Week course?
I think that's our goal with the online class. I mean, we're live streaming. You'll have really nice feeds of like Ryan's screen. You'll get curriculum. You'll have access to mentors. So we essentially took the in-person class and tried to make it as beneficial to the online students as we could. So that was the goal there. And like I said, I don't know too many plans about going forward with React Week. But for right now, yeah, we're just trying to make next week as good of an experience for our attendees as we can.
What were some of the logistical challenges you've had in organizing an event like this?
There are a lot, actually. And everyone who like organizes a conference tells you that, but you never really listen to them because you're like, oh, it can't really be that hard.
Right. It's got to be easy.
Yes, it's got to be easy. Curriculum, as I've talked about, we spent a lot of time with curriculum, and that's been my nights and weekends for the last like 4 months is curriculum. So that was difficult, but it wasn't too bad. I think the biggest logistic things, online streaming is something you have to get right if you're going to offer it. Luckily, I've had a lot of help there, and we've bought a lot of equipment to make sure it goes well. So yeah, the biggest thing is technically and logistically is just the online class, making sure that everyone has good access to mentors and there's good stream and it's available for download. Luckily, with the nature of Dev Mountain where I work, all like the in-person stuff logistically is already taken care of because that's what we do as a business. So we kind of looked out there. But yeah, online stuff has definitely been the biggest focus as far as logistics go.
That's great. So is there anything else that we should know about React Week and what people should expect? I'm assuming it's sold out at this point.
It's getting really close. We will probably close I actually was waiting for this podcast, and I'll probably wait a few days to see if anyone watches this, to see if they want to buy tickets. Right. We'll probably close online tickets here in the next few days, and in-person tickets soon as well. I think actually in-person tickets might sell out before online tickets do, so it's getting really close.
So everybody, buy your tickets now.
Buy your tickets now, yeah.
You can listen to the podcast later.
Yeah, if I had to give a date, I would probably say by Friday everything will be shut down. So.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty awesome, though. And this is the first time you've done this. This is something new.
The very first time, yeah. I mean, as far as like running a workshop or a conference, none of us had experience doing it. None of us are marketers. It was one of those things where it was like, well, how would we market to ourselves? And then we kind of went that route. So it's been really, really successful so far. We're really excited for it. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, one of the logistical things I think to deal with too is the money, right? So how do you get money to buy this equipment and do these things?
Yep.
So that's something that's a challenge for sure.
It's been tricky. Luckily, we have. I mean, my full-time job is like educational experiences, right? As far as like everything we had to buy for React Week, luckily you can kind of write that off as a business expense for the actual core business, which is Dev Mountain, which has been really, really nice because I haven't had to worry about a lot of that stuff because Dev Mountain does really well, and the things that we get for React Week are just going to benefit Dev Mountain students in the future. So we left that there.
And as far as React Week goes now, with all these people going there, it's going to be very busy. You're going to have a lot of great mentors and great people there who are going to learn quite a lot, I'm sure. Like, what should they expect to take away from that experience?
So I have a few goals. I think the biggest thing is just feeling comfortable with React and the React ecosystem. Getting started with React itself isn't difficult, but when you add in like Browserify or like Webpack, then you throw in like routing and Flux, it gets very hairy very quickly. So the main goal with React Week is just to ease that transition as you're starting out with React. And that's the biggest goal. If we can have people have just really good networking opportunities and kind of get a love for Utah that we have and want to come back to Utah, I think that's a win. So that's the goal.
Well, I have so many people that I talk with who are like, NG Comp's one of the best comps I've been to, and that's over in Salt Lake, right? So it's pretty awesome. Like I'm expecting the same caliber over there. So
yeah, we are too. So hopefully you hear good things.
Definitely. And if people, we have a lot of developers on here. Maybe they're new to teaching in general. Do you have any other suggestions as far as like if you're a developer and you want to get better at the teaching skill?
The biggest thing is to try to remember what it was like when you were a beginner, because it's extremely hard to do a lot of the times, and this is one of the points I'm addressing in my talk today as well, is as developers we forget very quickly how hard it was to learn how to program, and then when we do that, we then make assumptions about what our students know. I think one of the biggest compliments that I get as a teacher is whenever there's a question that's good but it's unnecessary, I'll kind of just ask the person to come talk to me after class. For example, if we're talking about for loops and someone says, "Hey, I read this thing about like mapping and reducing online. What is that?" That's a very good time to not talk about map and reduce, because people are still kind of struggling with just looping over an array just with like a for loop, right? So I think being able to see when questions are valid and when they're not valid is really important, and just practicing emphasize, or what's the word? Being empathetic, empathizing with beginners I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, it's really hard. I can feel the sort of details of what was mysterious about learning programming sort of slipping away through time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not an easy skill, and it's very different. A lot of people just think, oh, well, I do this stuff every day, so I can definitely teach somebody how to do it, but it's two separate things.
Very separate things, yep. And finding the person who can do both of those things is rare, and that's one of my jobs. And I feel like we've done a fairly good job so far. So.
Yeah, it seems like. I wish we could get out there. So we're over in Virginia. At least Danny and Rob and I are.
Nice. Yeah, it's a long trip, definitely.
So thanks for coming on. If people want to find you or learn more about React Week, obviously they can go to reactweek.com. But if they want to learn more about the stuff that you're teaching at React Week, they want to contact you, find out how they can get further classes from your company, or just ping you for some quick like, hey, what is this about? I saw this reduce and and map thing online.
Yeah, I'm way confused. The best way I think is just on Twitter, twitter.com/TylerMcGinnis33. And then if anyone wants to shoot me an email, my email is tylermcginnis33@gmail.com.
Okay. Is there anything on GitHub that you have for training purposes that people might take a look at?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of like Firebase starter project type stuff that they can check out, whether it's like with authentication with React Router or authentication with like UI Router. And then my GitHub's just GitHub/TylerMcGinnis.
Very nice. Well, thanks for coming on.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me.